All trade discussions are off with Canada. And do you see how he just treats Canada and the European Union like they are the enemies? Terminate his life. I saved him from a very ugly and ignominious death, and he does not have to say thank you, President Trump.
What happens when a president points fingers while the economy collapses? Today, we're breaking down Trump's tantrum-filled Friday, from blaming Canada for everything to threatening Iran, and what it says about his spiral. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Trump's been running a victory lap all week, bragging about his so-called giant win in the Supreme Court. If you heard him talk about it, you'd think he was personally handed a superpower to rewrite the Constitution. But surprise! His celebration has just one problem. The win he's crowing about doesn't do what he says it does. This isn't just moving the goalposts. He's celebrating like he scored a touchdown in the wrong sport.
Issue of nationwide injunctions. You may have heard about this ruling where the Supreme Court limited the ability to get nationwide injunctions in the birthright citizenship.
Let's take a second to imagine this scenario differently. Think of a guy who goes to a football game, and when one of the players scores a goal, he jumps out of his seat, starts doing a dance in the stands, and claims credit for it. That's Trump this week. Sure, the Supreme Court decision did something. It limits individual groups and nonprofits from filing nationwide injunctions unless they group together as a class action. But that doesn't invalidate class actions outright, which means anyone wanting the same result can just file differently. It's like trying to lock one door when there's a dozen other ways to get into the same room. Trump wants this to sound like a sweeping victory, but it's really just him screaming mission accomplished on a first step that doesn't even take him in the right direction. Don't just take my word for it. Legal experts like Norm Eisen have been quick to call out the nonsense here. Eisen, who's been known to politely shred Trump's legal fantasies, clarified that the ruling, while narrowing injunctions, doesn't touch the cases Trump's bragging about. Eisen also pointed out that states can still file injunctions normally, and nationwide class actions are still fair game for reaching the same results. So essentially, the tools Trump claims to have defeated are very much alive and well. It just takes a slightly different process to use them now. It's like he got rid of one screwdriver from the toolbox and is now pretending hardware stores no longer exist. And if the irony here weren't enough, there's an added wrinkle that makes Trump's faux victory parade even richer. For years, Trump and his supporters loved using nationwide injunctions to block policies from the Biden administration, shouting about the importance of checks and balances every chance they got. Now that the tactic doesn't suit his agenda though, suddenly it's a great victory that the functionality has been somewhat limited. Talk about situational principles. It's like a kid who changes the rules of chess mid-game because they keep losing, only to claim they invented the new version all along. This grandstanding also reveals a bigger pattern we've seen before. Trump's flair for dramatic headlines is never matched by the substance behind them. He thrives where there's ambiguity, happy to fill in the blanks with whatever narrative paints him as the hero. Facts need not apply. It's not even clear whether Trump fully understands the decision he's celebrating, or if he's just banking on no one looking into the details. Either way, it's working for him as long as his audience claps. But the kicker is this: his giant win might not even help him politically the way he hopes. Sure, his base might eat it up, but the Supreme Court ruling really doesn't move the needle on the cultural wedge issues he's trying to stoke, like birthright citizenship. And with uninformed media coverage amplifying his claims without context, he's managed to spark a conversation that has no actual legal basis. All smoke, no fire. A classic Trump performance. So what's the takeaway here? Trump's giant win is really more of a consolation prize for a game he wasn't even playing. The Supreme Court decision he's parading around barely changes the playing field and leaves the tools he dislikes completely intact, just with a slightly different label slapped on them. But don't expect Trump to backtrack. Humility has always been a tough sell for him. He's still throwing a victory parade, participation ribbon pinned proudly to his chest, while the rest of us are left shaking our heads. Coming up next, Trump's international strategy or lack thereof. We'll dive into how, just as his domestic wins flop, he's decided the real villains of this story are Canada and the EU? Trust me, you don't want to miss the finger-pointing mess that follows. When Trump's back is against the economic wall, his favorite move is to look for someone to blame. And this time, his targets of choice are Canada and the European Union. That's right, when it's not immigrants or the media, it's our neighbors up north and our longtime allies overseas who are apparently sabotaging America. The logic? Well, don't expect much of it, but that hasn't stopped Trump from turning the blame game into his own Olympic sport. Trump recently lashed out at Canada over their digital services tax. Yes, a tax aimed at large tech corporations, many of which are based in the US. According to Trump, this is a direct attack on the American economy, because obviously the biggest threat to America's financial stability is definitely Canada, a country where ice hockey and politeness are national pastimes.
Has just announced that they are putting on digital services tax on our American technology companies, which is a direct and blatant attack on our country.
He immediately cut off all trade discussions with them, throwing out an ultimatum and threatening tariffs unless they back down. Never mind that these kinds of taxes are becoming more common globally, or that similar policies in the EU aren't any secret. For Trump, it's all personal. But here's where things start to crack under scrutiny. While Trump is pointing fingers and handing out threats, Canada's not exactly sweating. Instead, they're busy strengthening ties with the European Union. The two recently reinforced trade and defense pacts, going as far as to coordinate more closely at NATO summits. And you know who's on the outside of that growing friendship? Yep, the United States. Trump's antics at NATO summits, where he's notoriously combative, have left America not leading alliances but watching them from the sidelines. So while Trump paints himself as the tough guy, it's Canada and the EU walking away hand in hand, leaving him shouting vaguely about fairness into the void. Let's not forget Trump's go-to excuse here: tariffs. Whenever he gets cornered economically, he's quick to slap tariffs on other countries under the guise of protecting American jobs. Remember when he said, Canada has charged our farmers as much as 400% tariffs for years on dairy products? That's been a long time talking point for him, one he likes to drag out whenever things get dicey.
The fact that they have charged our farmers as much as 400% tariffs for years on dairy products.
But here's the reality. Tariffs like the ones he keeps threatening don't fix economic problems. They often make them worse. Take inflation, for example. Economist Justin Wolfers recently pointed out that consumer spending is down, inflation is up, and tariffs aren't exactly helping. In fact, they're likely adding to the problem by driving up costs even further. It's as if Trump set a toaster on fire and then blamed the flames on the bread. And let's talk about how this whole blame Canada routine fits into the broader picture. By alienating countries like Canada and throwing tariffs around like confetti, he's widening the rifts in international partnerships that used to work in America's favor.
But he's been attacking Canada, lashing out at Canada this morning and saying all discussions with Canada are off.
Canada, the EU, and even other nations are finding common ground, not with the US, but with each other. They're building a stronger network without us, and it's a network we might need, economically, politically, and even militarily. For Trump, though, this isn't just about policies or alliances, it's about optics. As long as he can redirect attention away from inflation, consumer issues, and all the warning signs blinking on the economy, he's happy, and international scapegoats are the perfect way to do it.
All trade discussions are off with Canada. And do you see how he just treats Canada and the European Union like they are the enemies?
Blaming a faraway country keeps the conversation just vague enough for his supporters to buy into, while still sounding like he's taking action. But for everyone else watching, it's painfully clear these moves don't solve anything. They just burn more bridges. At the end of the day, all this international finger pointing ends up looking like a homeowner mad at the rain when their ceiling starts leaking. The issue isn't the weather, it's that they never bothered to fix the roof. That's Trump's leadership in a nutshell. Canada's digital tax didn't cause inflation. Europe's alliances didn't sideline the US. NATO's awkwardness didn't happen by accident. Trump didn't maintain his house, and now he's flailing around looking for someone else to blame for the mess. Speaking of which, we've got to address his latest target, Iran, missiles, $800 million in defense spending, and an Ayatollah in the mix. Trust me, the Iran grudge match has all the chaos you'd expect. Let's talk about what's really going on there. Trump's latest target is one he's clashed with plenty of times before, Iran. In his typical style, the former president took to social media to declare himself the unlikely hero of a standoff with the Iranian government. According to Trump, he single-handedly saved Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, from what he described as a grim and ignominious death. Now, if you're scratching your head wondering why Trump would claim credit for sparing someone he's called an enemy, you're not alone. But don't worry, Trump has an explanation. Republican. Well, sort of. He claims that during his presidency, he stopped Israel from launching a large-scale attack on Tehran, pulling back their planes mid-air to prevent what he described as tremendous damage and massive casualties.
He demanded that Israel bring back a very large group of planes which were heading directly to Tehran, looking for a big day.
In Trump's words, he was the voice of reason that saved Khamenei and Iran from disaster. He also mentioned working on lifting sanctions, supposedly out of kindness, to grant Iran what he called a full, fast, and complete victory. But because there's always a catch with Trump, the moment Khamenei made statements celebrating victories over Israel, Trump claims he immediately canceled the whole plan in a fit of disgust. Apparently, Khamenei bruised Trump's ego, so everything was off the table.
During the last few days, I was working on the possible removal of sanctions and other things which would have given a much better chance to Iran.
Let's break this down. First, there's his claim about halting an Israeli military operation against Iran. While there's no evidence to fully confirm this story, it fits Trump's style of rewriting history to put himself at the center. The problem is, this isn't really about diplomacy. It's about Trump making sure the spotlight stays on him. He wants credit not just for preventing a war, but for offering what he conveniently calls victory to a country he spent much of his presidency sanctioning and antagonizing. It's like someone lighting a fire, threatening to throw gasoline on it, and then expecting applause for deciding to pour some of the gas back into the can. But let's not skip past the bizarre focus on Khamenei's life. The dramatic pronouncement that he saved Iran's supreme leader from a grim demise sounds less like foreign policy talk and more like the plot of an action movie Trump wished he'd starred in.
And he's also telling the Ayatollah of Iran, I saved you from a very ugly and ignominious death.
It reads as performative, a way for him to act like the reluctant hero. In reality, the US-Iran relationship during Trump's presidency was defined by escalating tensions, like pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal and imposing sanctions that crippled Iran's economy. If this is Trump's definition of saving, it clearly comes with conditions, strings, and a monologue about how great he is. The fallout from these tensions has been both financial and strategic. Take the $800 million the US spent defending Israel with its THAAD missile system, for example. That's right, 20% of the country's entire stockpile of these high-tech missile defense systems was used over an 11-day window to protect Israel from Iranian missiles. Think about that for a second. Nearly a fifth of America's cutting-edge missile inventory gone in a little over a week. The price tag alone is staggering, and it doesn't even account for the broader impact on US military resources. Yet, here comes Trump, casting himself as the unofficial referee in a conflict he arguably made worse with his aggressive rhetoric.
Terminate his life. I saved him from a very ugly and ignominious death, and he does not have to say thank you, President Trump.
And let's not overlook the irony of Trump's claims about sanctions relief. He portrays himself as a generous negotiator betrayed at the last moment by his adversary's bad attitude. In reality, the sanctions were designed to suffocate Iran's economy, and their impact was devastating. This isn't a hidden detail, it's well documented. For him to now imply that he was a step away from turning Iran's grim economic situation around feels more like retroactive spin than an actual policy strategy. It's disingenuous at best and deeply misleading at worst. What stands out most in all of this is the pattern. Whenever there's a chance to reduce tension or build a genuine resolution, Trump seems to do the opposite. His approach to Iran wasn't about preventing conflict. More often than not, it was about turning the heat up and then blaming them for the fire. In the end, Trump's Iran policy wasn't about making the region safer or stabilizing relations. It was about headlines, social media, and keeping his name in the conversation. The cost, hundreds of millions of dollars, precious missile stockpiles, and irreversible damage to diplomatic relationships. Much like his celebratory Supreme Court win, this grudge match with Iran is less about substance and more about perception. It's all part of the same playbook: deflect, distract, and declare victory, even when the scoreboard says otherwise. And speaking of that playbook, it's clear Trump has no intention of putting it down. This isn't just a one-day headline strategy, it's a pattern. From boasting about hollow wins to blaming anyone but himself, he's building a legacy of chaos. But what happens when the finger-pointing stops working? Stick around, there's more fallout to uncover. Trump's Friday wasn't just a chaotic string of events, it was a masterclass in sidestepping blame. A giant win in the Supreme Court that didn't solve what he claimed it did. Check. Blaming Canada, China, the EU, and even tariffs for America's problems? Absolutely. Toss in $800 million spent on missiles to defend Israel while scorning diplomacy, and you've got Trump's signature move: spin the blame wheel and see where it lands. But here's the question: can a strategy built on dodging accountability actually hold up? Maybe Trump should ask himself, what happens when the finger pointing runs out of fingers? Think about that.